Mr. Speaker, I'm determined to make it harder for people to work illegally in this country, and that's why there will be checks, they will be digital, and they will be mandatory. And Mr. Speaker, on consistency, don't get me started on 5 Prime Ministers, 6 Chancellors, 8 Home Secretaries, 16 Housing Ministers. They had more positions in 14 years than the Kama Sutra. No wonder they're knackered and they left the country screwed.
Right, so picture this. You're accused of nicking a few dodgy antiques, you're sat in a police cell, and your solicitor leans in and says, "Good news, mate, you can choose between 12 random strangers deciding your fate, or one judge who's had a rough morning." Sounds brilliant, doesn't it? Well, that's essentially what the government is proposing right now, and let me tell you, the backlash has been absolutely spectacular. Sir Keir Starmer's grand plan to limit jury trials is causing such a political firestorm that even his own MPs are threatening to resign and trigger by-elections. Yes, you heard that right. We're talking full-on political kamikaze territory. So buckle up, because today we're diving into one of the most controversial justice reforms in recent British history. And trust me, it's messier than a Christmas dinner argument about Brexit. Quick favour, if you're finding this interesting, smash that subscribe button. Over 94% of you haven't yet. It's completely free, takes literally 1 second, and it genuinely helps us keep making these videos. Cheers if you did. Right, back to the chaos. Now, let me set the scene properly. Whitehall is currently ablaze with rumours that Starmer might be backing down from his controversial proposals faster than a politician deleting old tweets. Sources are whispering that government officials have been frantically discussing changes in what's being described as a last-ditch attempt to avoid an absolute pummelling in the House of Lords. And when I say pummelling, I mean the kind of political defeat that keeps prime ministers awake at night, staring at the ceiling, questioning their life choices. The proposal in question would establish a new criminal court where judges would hear cases completely on their own, no jury required, all in a desperate bid to clear the absolutely massive courts backlog that's been growing like mould in a student flat. Justice Secretary David Lammy, bless him, is apparently still pushing ahead with the plans in their current form, at least according to The Guardian. But here's where it gets juicy. One government source, speaking with the kind of weary resignation usually reserved for England football fans, told The Guardian, "We've had U-turns in recent months on inheritance tax for farmers and business rates for pubs. There is a risk that the next one is going to have to be jury trials." I mean, at this point, the government's doing more reversals than a learner driver in a cul-de-sac. But wait, because it gets even better. Another insider chimed in with what might be the understatement of the year. Ministers are confident they can get the package through the Commons, even with the opposition of some high-profile Labour MPs. The real battle lies in the Lords. Confident, they say. That's like saying the Titanic was confident about icebergs. Because here's the thing, Labour isn't just battling with the crusty old Lords in their ermine robes, they're fighting a war on multiple fronts, and some of the heaviest artillery is coming from their own benches. Enter Carl Turner, veteran Labour MP and former barrister, who's basically threatened to go full scorched earth on this policy. Turner won his Kingston-upon-Hull East constituency by a majority of just 4,000 votes over Reform UK back in the general election. Now, considering the dramatic shift in the polls since then, if he triggered a by-election, as he's threatened to do over this ludicrous proposal, Reform would probably waltz into that seat like they owned the place. That's not just a political threat, that's a political thermonuclear option. Turner isn't messing about, and he's got very personal reasons for his stance. Here's where Turner's story becomes genuinely compelling. Years ago, he dealt in antiques, as one does. He bought some items that, unbeknownst to him, turned out to be stolen. Bit awkward, that. As he told the Sunday Times, "I was arrested, interviewed by the police, charged and remanded in custody for court." On the advice of my legal team, I was advised, on the strength of the evidence, to elect for a jury trial. Think about that for a moment. An innocent man, now an MP, who was given the choice of how to prove his innocence. Under the new proposals, people in similar situations might not get that choice. They'd be stuck with a single judge, and frankly, that's about as comforting as a chocolate teapot. So, what exactly is Lammy proposing? Well, the Justice Secretary, who ironically once warned that scrapping jury trials would be a bad idea, is now looking to stop defendants who are likely to receive a sentence of 3 years from appearing in front of a jury. Instead, a shiny new judge-only Swift court would be set up to hear cases without juries, and magistrates would be allowed to sentence people to a maximum of 18 months, up from the 12 months they can currently hand down. It's efficiency over tradition, speed over scrutiny, and a lot of people are absolutely livid. The government's argument? They're trying to clear an 80,000 case backlog in a decade. 80,000! That's not a backlog, that's a judicial traffic jam of apocalyptic proportions. Lammy's been pointing to Canada, saying it's been happening there for decades and it's very normal. Right, because when British people hear, "let's do it like Canada," we all immediately think, yes, that's exactly what our centuries-old justice system needs. Look, I've got nothing against Canada, lovely place, excellent maple syrup, but perhaps our justice system shouldn't be adopting foreign models like their trendy new haircuts. But here's the twist that makes this whole saga even more deliciously political. The Ministry of Justice isn't expected to completely U-turn on the proposal. No, that would be too straightforward, too honest. Instead, sources are suggesting the retreat would take the policy closer to Brian Levinson's proposed changes. For those who don't spend their evenings reading legal reform documents, that means they're probably going to water it down just enough to claim they listened, while still fundamentally changing how British justice works. It's the political equivalent of saying, "I hear you," whilst carrying on doing exactly what you were planning anyway, just with slightly different wrapping paper. Now, you didn't think the Conservatives were going to let this slide without comment, did you? Tory leader Kemi Badenoch absolutely pounced on the rumours of yet another Labour U-turn, with the kind of glee usually reserved for finding a tenner in your coat pocket. If Keir Starmer had a backbone, he would stand up to his Justice Secretary and cancel this mad idea to scrap jury trials, Mrs. Badenoch declared. Ouch! That's not just a political jab, that's a full uppercut. Whether or not you agree with Badenoch on policy, you've got to admire the directness. No corporate speak, no diplomatic niceties, just straight for the jugular. Of course, the Ministry of Justice has responded with the kind of carefully worded statement that could only come from a government department under siege. Their spokesman said, "Only reform combined with investment will deliver swift and fair justice for victims. That's why we're creating new swift courts without magistrates and within the Crown Court, as well as investing millions in legal aid, the courts, and increasing sitting days." Translation: we're doing this whether you like it or not, but please notice we're also throwing money at the problem to make it seem less terrible. The fundamental problem here is one of perception versus reality. The government wants to be seen as tough on illegal migration. They want to project an image of control, of decisive action, of modern, innovative approaches to age-old problems. And, in theory, using social media to communicate government work makes sense. We live in a digital age. People consume information on these platforms. Transparency about enforcement activities could theoretically build public confidence. But there is a massive gap between theory and execution. What the government has actually created is a piece of content so tone-deaf, so obviously performative, that it has become a lightning rod for mockery. The dramatic music, the action movie editing, the whole vibe of it screams, "trying too hard." It feels like when your dad tries to use youth slang and somehow makes everything infinitely more awkward. How do you do, fellow border security enthusiasts? It is the governmental equivalent of that. And here is the truly delicious irony in all of this. The government launched this TikTok account presumably to control the narrative around migration and border security. They wanted to show strength, competence, results. Instead, they have handed their critics an absolute gift. They have created a focal point for every joke, every criticism, every ounce of skepticism about their migration policies. The comment section of that lone video has become a digital town square where the British public is exercising its God-given right to take the absolute piss out of authority figures who have made themselves look silly. The question we must ask is, what were they thinking? Did nobody in the entire chain of approval for this project raise their hand and say, hang on, might this come across as a bit daft? Was there no moment of reflection where someone thought perhaps a social media account is not the solution to a complex humanitarian and political crisis? The fact that this made it through multiple levels of government bureaucracy and political oversight without anyone pumping the brakes is genuinely fascinating from a decision-making perspective. You also have to spare a thought for the poor social media manager who has been assigned to run this account. Imagine that job description. Wanted, social media expert to make illegal immigration enforcement engaging and shareable. Must be comfortable with constant mockery and single-digit engagement rates. Thick skin essential. Apply within. That person is currently living through what can only be described as a professional nightmare. They are the face of one of the most ridiculed government initiatives in recent memory, and they have to keep posting through it all with a stiff upper lip. What makes this entire situation even more absurd is the timing. We are in January 2026. TikTok is hardly new or cutting edge anymore. If the government had launched this 5 years ago, it might have seemed innovative, ahead of the curve. But now it just looks like everyone finally caught up to what young people were doing in 2019 and decided to copy it without understanding why it worked in the first place. It is the policy equivalent of your mum finally getting Snapchat just as everyone has moved on to the next thing. The broader context here matters too. This is not happening in a vacuum. The UK has been grappling with migration issues for years. The small boats crisis has dominated headlines. Different governments have tried different approaches, from the Rwanda scheme to increased channel patrols to international agreements. Some of these approaches have been more successful than others. Some have been controversial. Some have been legally challenged. But what they all had in common was that they were actual policy interventions, not marketing exercises.